Hey there, it's Christina, and it is May 2014, and it is, well, in a few weeks it's going to be Mother's Day, and usually during this time of the year I get a little sad because I lost my mom in 2011. It's been 3 years now. She died of pancreatic cancer. And she was in a hospice setting for about a year, and just her condition declined, and then she passed away. So usually this time of year I'm reflecting on about my mom, and I guess what I want to, of course I'm still very sad about it, and, thinking of her and missing her and remembering how much she loved me, and, feeling alone and stuff like that. But I wanted to find a way to turn that positive, and instead of exclusively focusing on what's absent in my life, think about what I can do to help others. And I think I'm going to make a donation to the Women's Center in Vienna, Virginia here. I live in Tyson's Corner, very near to this organization, and it's a wonderful organization, and it's been going on. I first heard about it in the 1980s, so it's been in Northern Virginia for decades. And what they do is they help women in crisis, any kind of crisis, and whether that's post-divorce, after divorce, or if there's domestic violence and she leaves with herself or the children and doesn't have shelter or safety, if the spouse is abusive or alcoholic or addicted to drugs, or she's trying to reestablish herself and learn skills for the workforce, needs certain apparel and dress clothes to go on interviews. I think maybe on the back of this card it says a little bit more what would they do. Yeah. And the womenscenter.org if you want to learn a little bit more about it. And the reason this calls to me is because my mom was a single mom. My dad and her were married. They lived in Ohio, and for whatever reasons, my dad left when I was a baby, 1 year old. And they had a volatile relationship. There was shared custody briefly, and even as a baby, I remember when they were exchanging me, on the weekends, between themselves, there was a lot of yelling, a lot of cursing. They would spit at one another, and there was sometimes the glass of the front door would shatter. They would throw things. I remember clothes put out to the curb in trash bags. I remember sort of being left. I mean, I don't know. I think they used me to get to each other. And my mom, the weekends that my dad would come to get me and have custody, she wouldn't be there, or would create a lot of violence and verbal abuse. I actually remember this as an infant. And then my dad said, I'm not paying any more child support if this is how it's going to be, and you're going to make custody hard. So he left and never paid anything again. I've never known him in my life. Never received anything emotionally or financially from him ever. And just lived with my mom, and we moved back to Pennsylvania, and it was a very turbulent, troubled childhood. So I understand the stress of a single parent and single mom, and how it is to work, try to work. Like we never had a lot of money. My mom didn't have any college, so she was just a single income, not a lot of earning potential, and had to have me in daycare, which she always stressed about. And she's very overprotective of me. Once we moved from Pennsylvania to Virginia, we moved down here. She got a really good job. I mean, for the time and her credentials, she worked at the U.S. Treasury Department for like 20 years. So that was the security and that she needed to raise a child, and that's what she did. And we lived in Arlington. We moved down here when I was in 3rd, 4th grade. Went to Randolph Elementary School. Went to Thomas Jefferson High School in Alexandria for science and tech. But anyway, I was also in foster care. My mom had a nervous breakdown, I guess that's what you call it, a meltdown, and she released custody of me too. First my dad and then my mom. So literally, legally, I was an orphan, and I was taken into the custody of Fairfax County Department of Social Services. I was assigned a social worker, a counselor. I spent some time in Alternative House on Gallows Road, another organization that is in, that I like to be charitable towards, because it was there when I was in an emergency, so that I wasn't homeless and on the streets. And my mom checked into Mount Vernon Hospital inpatient psychiatric department to receive some care. So I remember the police at our house, and I had a black eye. There was a lot of verbal abuse. There was a lot of physical abuse. She was very destructive with food in the house, with my clothes. She would break things. She would rip up greeting cards like that I got her, and all that kind of stuff. And I guess the reason for me mentioning it is that I think that it was very hard for her to raise a child alone as a single parent with a single income, being away from the house and worrying about me. I could never do anything in high school. Like, she was so overprotective. I couldn't go out with friends. I could not date. I was fortunate that I got to go to the prom and homecoming when I was a senior. And I was an only child, so I've always been kind of to myself because of all these things. So I saw what the lack of a loving husband can do, loving father, lack of money, stress to work and commute, and pay for public transportation and work overtime and worry about strangers taking care of your children in daycare. And although I don't have any children, when I see single moms, I really see like my mother mirrored in these women, and it really touches my heart, and it takes my thoughts back to this time in my life, which of course I understand now. At the time I was younger, I didn't understand everything that was going on in the home. So that's why I want to make a donation to the Women's Center, because I know that there are other women out there, for whatever reason, they're in situations that are not healthy, but not permanent. They can be transient, and all they really need is support and resources, financial resources, educational resources, psychological counseling, sometimes clothes, sometimes shelter, sometimes, caretaking for their children. Just a lot of different things. And, a lot of women are not in positive relationships with their significant other or their husband. And there's a lot of addictions. There's a lot of alcoholism and drugs. There are women that don't have any college education or entrepreneurial skill. These things need to be taught so that they can establish financial independence, especially if they have children to raise by themselves. So I understand these dynamics, and I'm very sensitive to them and to this population of people that the Women's Center is serving. And I want to make a donation, and I think I'm going to make a tradition of making a donation every Mother's Day in memory of my mom, Connie J. Haftman, and all that she tried to do. And I know that my mom made a lot of mistakes, but I also have forgiven her and realized that she was doing the best she could with the information that she had at the time. And also, it's important to remember there was no internet back then. It was not easy for someone to reach out and find resources and information like it is now with computers and Google and YouTube and blogs and ebooks and audiobooks and podcasts and mobile devices and iPads and all these resources that we have now. If we are in a crisis or have any trouble or conflict, we can find things so much easier. And I know my mom had a lot of pride. She didn't, she had these beliefs about things that sort of prevented her from seeking help. She thought that if she saw a psychological counselor, it meant she was insane or crazy or mentally ill, and that people would think bad of her. We never went to church because she was divorced, and she grew up Catholic, and she thought that being divorced was, she would not be looked on good in church, so we never went to church. We never went to family reunions and things like that because she didn't want to show up without a spouse, without a husband. And, she felt the other women who were married had better lives than she did, and that they would never understand her reality. So my mom, she had some of these beliefs that, kept her very isolated. And, So, and also, she also grew up in a small town where everybody knew everybody. My grandfather had a business, so everybody knew that our name and who we were in a little small town. So she thought that, she didn't want to go seek counseling. She didn't want anyone to ever find out that, people knew she was divorced, but people didn't know about the magnitude of abuse that was going on behind closed doors. And it was kept private. And, my family knew, and they didn't want to talk about it either because of reputation. So maybe these dynamics are happening for other people too, and they're avoiding getting the help that they need to get on with their lives and make this a transient situation, not a permanent situation that cascades. And imagine what your children are, enduring and learning and going to repeat because of, it. So I was able to transform my life and turn my life around, and I want to help other people. And there's so many wonderful organizations in the world. I also love Guiding Eyes for the Blind, Canine Companions, using dogs to help people with disabilities and blindness have mobility and independence in this world. So I do have some favorite charities, and this one is local here, as well as Alternative House, which is a halfway house for emergency foster care, emergency shelter for teens. And I was there. I stayed there. It's on Gallows Road in Tyson's Corner. I pass it daily. And